Hey everyone, I'm Groff, and on this episode of Untrained Ear, we are going to be diving into the new Boyfriend album, which is entitled In the Garden. Let's do it. Okay, for starters, this album was extremely difficult to conduct any degree of research on. American singer songwriter and producer, and not to mention performer, Susanna Elizabeth Powell, also known as Boyfriend, released In the Garden as her second full length LP, this following the release of Sugar and Spice, which came out in 2022. To date, most of the tracks on this LP are in the double digits. It is not super well known. This album released extremely quietly, considering that it actually received a glance from the Metacritic highly anticipated albums list this week. In fact, it is underground enough that it doesn't even have a listing on Genius, which made this review all the more difficult to conduct. In the Garden is a concept album that plunges listeners into the Garden of Eden from the perspective of primarily Eve, who is vocalized by Susanna, aka Boyfriend. There are 4 vocal guest features spread throughout this album, though the greatest nod really goes to Jake Shears, whose easygoing, jazzy vocal forays portray Adam's laissez-faire and, quite frankly, infuriating attitude and demeanor quite seamlessly. While this album is not perfect, the mixing and orchestration on it is quite strong and diverse. This thing has a myriad of genre blends in the likes of pop, funk, rap, soul, EDM, indie, rock, reggae, and even rock opera. Whew, that was a mouthful. Uh, all other analysis aside, what this album does in amazing fashion is recontextualize and humanize Eve across it, achieving through excellent writing and quite adept production tactics a glance at her through a not so traditional eye view. Words. So let's jump into track highlights, for which I am impressed to say there are quite a few. Let's open up with Eve, which is the prototypical in this album introduction to Eve, which is, I will say, laid out in sort of musical theater style, although not to threat for those of you who are scared off by anything having to do with the stage or stage performance. Most of this album is not very musical theater-esque. This song in particular is very pop. The mix is very bouncy in the bass, and there is a mix of these popping vocal jumps. For the bridge and the chorus, you actually get this really nice anthemic choir that joins Susanna in the mix and really accompanies her, giving her this very strong main character energy off the jump. It really establishes the idea that Eve is going to be the protagonist of this story. And then, like, in this mix, you get this really cool moment where there's this sudden, like, pulse of quiet, and Eve gets this very, like, Disney princess moment that's accompanied by these, like, plucking strings. Lyrically, the song really emphasizes curiosity, which is a huge word and theme for Eve across this, at least the front half of this album, and this hunger to kind of know about life and to live it. This mix is just so masterfully lush, and it left me honestly just by the time I reached this track, I was extremely shocked at the lack of attention that this album had received, and that was night of release. And now we are a couple days into the release, and the fact that only a couple of the tracks, namely the singles, have hit numbers in the thousands is quite shocking to me. I think that this release should be receiving a lot more attention than it's gotten already. With this, we jump into Curious. And I have to say, with this track, if you were to write a song about the first human beings on Earth getting intimate, trying to figure out intimacy, I think that this track really fleshes out and vocalizes that in an excellent way as it tries to get you behind Eve's psyche as she kind of pieces this thing together and tries to explain it to her partner. And it does it in this very simplistic, subtle way, lyrically, which I'll go ahead and emphasize that You have lines in the verses like this, with my wrist in your wrist, I feel activated. See what fits, where it fits. It's so calculated. It's all very like simple, and it kind of like brushes the surface. It's very flirty. And again, I'll draw on the word subtle here. And it's just so simple and primal in a way, and I just think it's like such an awesome idea lyrically. And then you get the chorus, which I also really like. Aren't you curious? Gets repeated a lot. And then there's two of us. Why is there two of us? Just great ideas with the words. And then behind the vocals, right, you get this mixing, which is simplistic but potent. You have synth rolls, okay, that are constantly coming in and out in waves. And then you have an electric pulse that sits behind the synth rolls, but it races like heartbeat racing. Okay, and then you have Susanna, and her voice is in this light reverb, but it's very like jazzy and airy, and it traces over the lyrics, which is very like suggestive and like flirtatious. And as the song progresses, the mixing intensifies, and it adds in drums, it adds in some complementary vocal forays, and then you get more dancing synth components. This track is just, at the end of the day, it's a very dark and insinuating track. I think it's just masterfully conceived. For the concept album, I think this was just expertly done. Um, Okay, I want to jump to the track Bite. This is like the middle ground, transitionary track. It symbolizes the fall. It symbolizes that moment when Eve bites into the apple. This track is done in EDM style. It opens with lyrics that are the only lyrics that aren't meant as ambience and symbolic tonality, where the line is, why do you make a this if you didn't want a that? Why do you give me questions if you didn't want them asked? Why do you give me fists if you didn't want to fight? Why do you give me teeth if you didn't want to? And then you don't get the word bite, which is the name of the track. And you fall into this awesome EDM mix. And across it, aside from the masterful production that Susanna just across the whole album, but especially this track brings to the table, you also get traces of previous tracks as these little reminders of Eve's journey so far, laced in with diegetic noises of apple bites, both literal bites into what presumably sound like apple, and also instruments that are clearly intended to replicate what it sounds like to bite into an apple. All of it jives very well with the mix. It's very trancy, and there's just this excellent tonal demonstration of that like pupil dilation, like the knowledge is coming into her head, and the good and evil of it all is just manifesting. And this like biblical canon moment that, if you dabble in the spheres of Christianity or Judaism, you're very familiar with this story and all of this. And it's just this moment that you've read about or heard about, billions of times. And it's just cool to see it contextualized in an EDM style. So very cool track. Okay, so you get into Fight, and this track is about the clash between Adam and Eve, which actually the track ends up playing out as not much of a clash at all, which I actually appreciated because this isn't really Adam's album. The vocal progression for Eve, who really takes over the track, and aside from like one verse which goes to Adam, carries the whole rest of the song. The vocal progression for Eve is very addicting and really reminiscent of like Taylor Swift, Olivia Rodrigo. It's very lent to the pop, like indie pop genre, but it borrows these very light elements of house. What I mean by that is there are these awesome like percussive elements mixed into the background. in the chorus. There is this like zingy synth, and then these percussive like Glock type strikes in the background that lace in with the chorus and just give it this real like punch to it. And I think symbolically enhance the idea of the severance between the unity of Eve and Adam. Overall, it's just another nod to the production genius in the portfolio of Susanna that she clearly just has in ample supply. Somebody needs to blow this chick up. So now we're going to get into the final track I want to talk about. It's the final track on the album, and it is Paradise Lost. By far, this is the strongest track on the album, and I will say this with my full chest. This is the biggest payoff I've encountered on an album this year. This is a very strong contender for my track of the year. You have heard me criticize many albums this year for ending on the wrong note. And to all of those albums, I challenge you that this is how you do it. This track is a genre blend, something that's played with throughout this album. It's a genre blend of rock opera, pop, and glitch pop. The mix is immensely lush as you jump in hot with glitchy faded vocal samples. You get electric drums, popping bass, and you get Susanna in low vocals. The first time on the whole album, she sounds, for lack of a better terminology here, borderline satanic. When I first listened to this, it was so reminiscent of Billie Eilish, Bury a Friend. And you get this mucky, nasty lyrical spread in the first verse, but it's in this very empowered and witchy way. Across this entire album, you're watching Eve go from curious to wanting to challenging to cast out to committed. And you get this verse: reach in the mud, pull out my name. Dirt's where we're headed. Dirt's where we came from. Then the bridge hits. You get this epic piano and a choir accompaniment. You get these assertive drums and climbing violins for emphasis of the resolve. Everything is crystallized because Eve's development is complete. I had to provide my own lyrics for this, which is a sin. Do better, internet. Get this girl some exposure. I'll be your horror story. I'll be your beauty queen. The patron saint of pure mistakes. The bitch who fucked up everything. I'll be your blame taker. I'll be your miscarried dream. A powerless whore whose power still bore all of humanity. So come after me, all ye who come after me, 'cause I'll never be, never be, never be, never be sorry. It is all laid bare. All the questions, all the self-doubt, all of the back and forth. Eve has blossomed. And for better or worse, she has become who she will be. We have followed her from the beginning to who she is now. And it is this super epic conclusion, and it has all the elements to tout for that. What a wicked track. So well done. Worth listening to. This album is not free from criticism. I absolutely have to address the Big Freedia feature. I think that's how the name is pronounced. Let's give the guy some props. Here's the props. The voice is good for the role that he played, which is he's the voice of God in this story. He's got a very like booming, like godlike voice. And he doesn't only rap, he does some like vocal singy-esque pieces as well. And in those, I think he's fine. However, the bars were lacking. They were not hitting home They were repetitive. The writing was a little stale. It just kind of came across as cringe. Now, I theorize that this could be due to there's a clear disenfranchisement with maybe it's Judaism, maybe it's Christianity. I'm not too sure with this piece, but whatever the case, it caused the music to absolutely suffer in any rap piece that this guy touched. And I will clarify that it is not because of the samples or any of the mixing behind any of the bars, which was all extremely strong and lent to good trap style rap. So I can't even give any excuses there. It is strictly in the delivery and the lyricism. So sorry. That leads kind of into my other piece, which is the lyrics on some of the tracks are organized in more of a musical theater style. For me, this is fine, but I also have a background in theater and musical theater, so it's something that I can kind of jive with. But I recognize that for most, this is going to be an instant turnoff, and they will prefer their lyrics to be less on the nose. This is not in most of the tracks. Most of the tracks are pop, indie. There's a billion genres across this album, but there are some tracks that are more theater-esque than others. So it is something to be wary of going into the project. That being said, this is a sleeper album. I am shocked that it has not blown up any more than it has already. The mixing is masterful. This artist is somebody to pay attention to. She knows what she's doing sonically. She has a great voice. And it's clear that she will have some great stuff coming down the line in the future. This is a replayable album. Some of the singles are replayable out of context even, and this was just extremely strong in my opinion, and I am shocked that it has no Genius entry. Horrified maybe is the better term. On the websites that it does have entries, you can't find the music for anything but the singles or the lyrics. Um, yeah, mortifying. You can barely do research. She barely has a Wikipedia page. What is going on here? Yeah, when I think about a baseless rating for this album, I'm going to have to give it a Napalm 9, and I hope it blows up like Napalm.